Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Dom from Lensprotogo and Lens Rentals, and welcome back to the channel. In last week's video, I talked about what's new with the GoPro Hero9. Now, as promised, in this week's video, I'm going to do a full comparison between the Hero8 and the Hero9. So let's cut right to the chase and see what GoPro improved with the 9th generation of their Hero camera. So the camera settings and the timestamps for all of the tests in this video are in the description. And before we start, I've listed a breakdown of the specs here so you can see visually what's the same and what's different with the 9. So you can pause it here if that's what you're into, or you could join me as we dive into these epic side-by-side tests. So the first test in this comparison is the stabilization test. I did this test in 5K 30 on the Hero9 and 4K 30 on the 8 with Boost Hypersmooth on. And then I did the same test but in 60p on each camera with the Hypersmooth on normal. All right, next is the auto exposure test. Moving on, here I did a low light test in a few different ISOs. Next is a test to see the difference in quality in super slow-mo frame rates like 120 and 240. And now here's a quick rolling shutter test shot in 24p. Okay, so in the last test that I did that was off camera, I learned that the GoPro 9 will overheat after about 20 continuous minutes of shooting in 4K 60. And that's a pretty similar story with the 8, which also overheated only a couple seconds before that. But I should mention here that this was actually supposed to be a battery test, and I was going to see which camera died first, shooting in 4K 60, but it kind of just turned into an overheating test because both of the cameras overheated. But before that happened, I did notice that the GoPro 8's battery level was at about 65% when it overheated, and the GoPro 9's was at about 73%. And they both recorded pretty much the exact same amount of video with like 5 or 10 seconds to spare. Okay, so here is my takeaway from these tests. Honestly, the image quality difference between the 8 and the 9 is not that drastic. With a newer, larger sensor, I was thinking that we were going to see some improvements in image quality, but there really isn't much different. If you're looking at the 5K video and the 4K video right next to each other, you're definitely going to see a little bit of a resolution difference. And pretty much right out of the box, the GoPro 9 is a bit cooler and greener than the GoPro 8, especially in low light. The stabilization in the 9 was really good, except I was content with the stabilization in the 8. The one big thing here though is that you can use the Boost Hypersmooth mode in 60 frames per second on the 9, and you could not do that on the 8. I think the larger battery in the 9 is to compensate for maybe that larger screen or the Hypersmooth 3.0, because honestly, I felt that the battery performance did not give me that much more life than if I was shooting on the 8. It was a little bit better, don't get me wrong, but for how much larger it is than the GoPro 8's battery, I was hoping for a lot more extra life out of each charge. So some things that I like about the GoPro 9 that I didn't necessarily test for were the auto horizon lock, which is really helpful, and I also found that the internal mic is way better than any previous GoPro. Also, I mentioned this in last week's What's New with the GoPro 9 video, but I love that it's larger. It makes operating this thing a lot easier. Also, I didn't think that the front-facing screen was going to be that helpful, but I ended up referencing it a lot. And when I was using the 8 and 9 side by side, I was looking at the 8 like, why don't you have that? Okay, so that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for this week's video. And if you have any questions about how I did these side-by-side tests, or if you have any suggestions for how I should do future tests in another video, drop a comment in the comment section. Also, while you're down there, hit that like button if you liked this video. And if that subscribe button is red, you're gonna wanna go ahead and click that and turn it gray to stay tuned in for more of our weekly content. And we'll see you in the next one.